Ever notice how we'll binge watch a whole season of a new show, but when it comes to investing for our future, putting money aside for retirement, that feels almost like a marathon that we procrastinate and we put it off, always waiting for a better day. Today, I want to discuss the real reasons why we procrastinate on savings, and we're not going to be talking about the idea of math and budgets, but we're really going to talk about why it is we don't do what we really want to do. Because once you understand why you delay, you'll be able to break that pattern. Meet Mike. Mike's 35 years old, 2 kids, bills paid, and yet when it comes to investing in his future, setting money aside for retirement, he always says, I will start next month. Things like kids' soccer games, baseball tickets, whether he's talking about fixing his car or an unexpected event that he had to spend money on, there's always something that pushes his investments for himself further and further into the future. This is what behavioral economists call present day bias. It just as it sounds, it means that we value the present more than we value things in the future. In many ways, retirement can feel like a movie that's coming out in 30 years. And so in your mind, you're saying, future me will deal with that. Future me will buy those tickets. He will invest more in the future. But the reality is, if present us doesn't do it, future us can't. I have found one of the best ways to deal with present bias is to have a plan for my future that I bring into the present, that we have goals. And the reason I'm a goal-based planner is because goals can push us through obstacles and things that we face in the present. I think we all sort of recognize that the comfort zone of the present, the urgency that we place on things that are happening now, even when you look at leadership in a company where the fire drill is always the issue of the day, that we have difficulty planning for the issues of the future. And just how when that happens at work, you're kind of like, I feel like we have fire drills every day because we're never dealing with the future. We just wait for it to become the present. I don't want that for you when it comes to your future retirement. That even if we enjoy working, I think at a minimum, we would like to work for fun and pleasure and not for the money. And so at least if we could separate our time from our money, I believe that work will become more enjoyable. And so when you have the goals, things that you actually can compare, now it's like, do I want to buy a pair of shoes? Do I want to go to a nice restaurant? Or do I want to be able to take that cruise? If we're able to now say, oh, the future looks bright, then we can look back and say, all right, I don't want to spend it on these things. And you'll sort of see that when people get diagnosed with something where they've been smoking and then they found out that they have lung cancer or that it's possible that they can get lung cancer, and then they can quit cold turkey because they never had something to compare that present satisfaction to in the future. But once you get diagnosed with something, now it's like, okay, I'm going to change. Or if someone gets diagnosed with cancer and they're like, well, it's tied to the food you eat. And then that person stops eating processed food. They stop eating heavy sugar because now they have something that they can compare it to. In many ways, by having a written plan, by having written goals, it helps us to really be able to reset our mind, to not just be thinking about all of the amazing things that happen in the present without ever measuring the cost of some of those things in the future. That actually leads us very nicely into the second reason that we delay planning for retirement, even when we do know better. And that is because when we visualize our future self, it is separate from our present self. And I know what you're thinking, you're like, Dre, what are you talking about? Well, there is a study that was done and they measured the brainwaves of people and they asked them to visualize their future self. And the way that their brain actually responded was as if they were visualizing a complete stranger. And you're like, there's no way. And I'm like, I know. But if you are visualizing a complete stranger, doesn't it then make sense that someone might have difficulty planning and giving money from present me to future me? Because I don't even know future me that well. Like, I don't know what that knucklehead's going to be doing. But if you were able to visualize your future you, if you wanted to connect the two, then you really do need to spend a lot more time thinking about not just the dollars and cents, because deep down we already understand that, but we really want to be thinking about, like, what am I going to be doing in retirement? How do I want to spend my time? What would I do if I did not have to think about money? What would that day look like? That is actually one of my favorite exercises is like, maybe I would have a personal chef. And then I was like, no, I think I kind of like cooking. Maybe I would have someone do this chore. And I was kind of like, I don't know. I sort of like these projects. And then I was like, maybe I would enter a whole bunch of obstacle course races. I would do more Spartan races. And then I was like, yes, that is definitely what I would do. that I would go get a PhD in economics. And again, I'd be like, yes, that's what I would do. And I do plan on doing both of those as I purchase more of my time. And that is going to allow me to be able to focus on some of those things that future me is already planning for. And when you're really thinking about how you want to allocate your time, I have something that I call the beginner happiness, and it's a wheel, and it goes through 8 aspects of how we spend our time. And all we would do is we would just measure how we feel about each of those categories. And if we feel like we spend enough time in them, then generally speaking, we measure it with a higher number. The goal is to recognize where it is that we're falling a little bit short, and then we start planning how we would spend our time if we purchased all of it back. Because I do find a lot of time when we talk about retirement, a lot of people immediately are thinking, well, that's something that you do when you're like 65, because that's what we're told. And then we have other people in Congress that are like, maybe we should push it back to 70 because everybody's living longer. I don't know. But what I do know is we actually are just separating our time from our money. And you can decide to do that at any age. If you're someone that feels like, there are people, I think, like Jim Rohn and Bob Hart, or different speakers that I listen to, they enjoy traveling, they enjoy speaking, and the work that they did, they could do forever. And both of them relatively did. They spoke probably within a few months of when they passed, right? Like that was something that they literally did till the day that they died. Other people, the work that they did, and they're like, that's a young man's game. I don't want to be in construction forever. I don't want to have to be hustling and running. I don't want to have to wake up at 4 a.m. and start analyzing stocks before I start investing. Sure, you could be thinking all of these things, right? So I know some hedge fund manager, I know some people that run construction projects, that we recognize that there are some things that we don't want to do forever. And we recognize that there's some things that we really do enjoy and would do forever. Wherever you fall on that scale, I still think we all enjoy the idea of separating our time from our money. That when we look at what people stress about, that money is like the reason people get divorced. Money is the number one stressor for many people. And then I find that things that are very close to money, i.e., they're like, I'm stressing about inflation. Well, that's technically money. We're talking about whether my money is growing with inflation. That if inflation was 10%, but you got a 10% raise every year, you want to stress about inflation. The issue is inflation is 10% and my raise is 2%. Okay, well, I'm going to stress about inflation. Or even when you talk about healthcare costs, everybody's like, man, healthcare expenses are going up a lot. If you have kids and you're talking about college costs going up a lot, that we recognize really the deciding factor in a lot of things that we do is whether we can afford it. And if you really look at the way the system is designed, it's designed to make lifelong employees. That there are certain things that we control economically, and we have the cost of those things go up. And that is your healthcare, you have like schooling, because if you make too much money from going to college, then you may leave the game a little bit early. If you work in certain industries, you have outside business related activities where they have to be approved because they don't want you to have too much of your free time. I find that to be the number one goal, at least for me, is to have control of all of my time so that way I can allocate it the way I want to. I would still have a financial planning firm. I would still make videos. I'm an educator at heart. I like to help people live their dream life. These are all things that I like to do. I find enjoyment in. But it took me many years to be able to put the systems in place to be able to allow me to do these things long enough that I could build a company that could support me, my wife, and my 4 kids. For the third reason that we delay investing for our future, let's use Lisa. Lisa hasn't delayed investing for her future because she's lazy. Lisa's definitely not lazy. Lisa delays because she's scared and overwhelmed. She doesn't want to make a mistake. There's so many stocks and bonds and investments and mutual funds and ETFs. And I'm just trying to figure out, everybody warns me that I don't want to have too high of fees in here, but then I also have prepayment penalties over there. And what if I end up losing my money? There was that one person that told me to buy this one company that if it just went to $1, it would change my life and we would all be billionaires. And I put my money in there and then it went to zero. That we're really sitting there like, well, dang, I don't want to mess this up. That at least if I can take the money and spend it in the present, I have less to worry about with the future, because the future might not even have that money. Because I know people that make mistakes. I see the stock market is very volatile. It goes down. I know people that have investment properties and they had to sell it for a loss, and they had to invest all that money early on. The number shows somewhere around like 90% of new businesses go bankrupt within the first 5 years because of funding and different issues that they have. So Lisa's sitting there like, I don't even know what to do. And once we feel overwhelmed, we're just like, you know what? I'm out. Don't worry about this. I'm going to go do something else. I'll figure that out later. And behavioral economists call this choice overload. And that is, just as it sounds, if I'm given too many choices, I get overwhelmed and I'm just like, I'll figure this out later because I don't want to mess up, but I also not 100% sure what right looks like. And we've seen this over and over again, where if you look at shows as simple as HGTV, where they'll show the people three houses and they'll show them a house that is over their price range but has everything they want. They'll show them a house that's under their price range but has nothing that they want. And then they show them kind of a house that has a compromise of both. And for most people, when I have three choices, I can make the right decision. We also see that in the restaurant industry, where most restaurants, they overwhelm us with so many choices of what to order. And that's why when you're scanning through the menu, they will normally say, hey, this is a fan favorite. And there'll be like four of those. Why do they do that? Because they know a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed looking at that. And so what they say, it's a fan favorite, or it's the chef's favorite, or it's whatever we use to help people decide, hey, don't feel overwhelmed by all the choice. We just have a handful of items for you to choose from that have been like hand selected, where you're just like, okay, I see those three are good for me. And when you're looking at your 401k, that's probably another reason why they typically limit the options as well, where you're going to have a aggressive, a moderate, and a conservative investment. You might have two of each, but you don't really see a whole lot of choices where they're just like, hey, how old are you? And then we move from there. There are things that are called like target date funds. And it's just as that sounds, like we give a target date and then they allocate the investments in a way that matches the risk of someone generally around that age. Now, I'm not someone that is a big fan of target date funds. If you look at the numbers, the fees on those are pretty high. And then when you look at just the impact of an additional 1% of fees, it's pretty big over the span of like 30 years of someone's retirement funds and how much they'll have left for themselves. So I do want to be mindful of those fees, because you really can do that rebalancing on your own. And I'll put a link to another video where I go through a handful of rebalancing strategies, but I'm just not sure that you're getting enough bang for your buck. That if I was to pay a fee that was closer to that, then at least I would like to have a financial planner that opens the door and is able to give me all of the options to help me make sure that we're not just investing the money, but we're investing in our future in a way that I'm excited about that future. If you're someone that thinks that might sound good to you, I'll put a link in the show notes where you can go to happilyretire.com, and for free, you'll be able to access my retirement readiness roadmap. And I hope you decide how to get started so that you don't feel stressed out or overwhelmed by the next decision. If you're someone that is feeling stuck currently, just like Lisa, we're just like, I'm procrastinating, not because I'm lazy, not because I don't know the value of it. I just don't want to mess up, but I'm not sure where to get started. Then it normally makes sense to just go ahead and get started. Just rip the Band-Aid off. Choose one stock, put $100 in, and then let's go ahead and just go from there. And by just getting started for as small as $20 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month, you'll start building momentum. You'll start being like, okay, this isn't as overwhelming as I thought. The money is now going towards this. And then I can start making some choices from there as far as what makes the most sense for me. And that actually leads us pretty nicely into the fourth reason that we delay investing for retirement. And that has to do with this myth of more time. The thought is, well, I don't have enough now, I'm raising kids, I have expenses, I have college to pay for. Right now, things are super hectic. I will start in 10 years. And I had met a guy and we had talked on and off for a while. And he said, look, now is not the time. And it's like, all right, now is not time, because sometimes now genuinely isn't the time. But it was like, all right, well, I'll do something in 10 years. And 10 years is a nice round number. It feels like, what could be wrong in 10 years? Or we have this rainbows and Skittles feeling about the future. But then 10 years, it comes and then it goes, because we didn't build the habit of investing. I'm someone that likes to build good habits, that even if I don't run very quickly, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to run. Because if I build a habit of running, if I become a runner, then I do the things that someone who runs does. And that is going to trickle into working out and strengthening myself. That's going to trickle into increasing my VO2 score so that my body functions and processes better. That's going to trickle into the way that I eat, because if I become a runner, I'm going to do the things a runner does. If you become an investor, you're going to do the things an investor does. If you say, well, in 10 years, I'll become an investor, then 10 years comes, but we're still 10 years as a non-investor. That we're still 10 years as someone who hasn't invested in my future, hasn't put money aside for retirement, but that was the plan. The question is really, do I become something in 10 years because I set that date? Or do I become something in 10 years because I started doing the things that person does? even if it's on the smallest scale, even if it's not in the most efficient way, and even if it might even have some mistakes along the way. That I know for me, right? I'm someone who, when you're talking about the streams of income and investing, part of the reason that I had chosen stock market early on is because real estate, I was super scared about the idea of investing all this money up front. And then I may or may not have someone that's actually living in the property, where instead of me generating a monthly income from a rental property, I'm actually paying a monthly income towards the rental property. And that was super scary for me. But I was sitting back and I acknowledged to myself where I was like, Dre, if you had actually started when you were thinking about it 10 years ago, would you have made mistakes? Yes. Would you have lost money? No doubt about it. But would you have those rental properties cleaned up now? And the truth is, I would. Those rental properties would be cleaned up now. I would have them. They would be optimized. I'd have my crew that's set aside with my real estate agents and the people that fix the properties. And I would probably have already built a pretty decent portfolio as I went through those issues. Sometimes we're trying to figure out, how do I get the wisdom without getting the experience? And I have found that wisdom comes from the experience. That if we want to have the wisdom of someone who had been renting properties for 10 years, then we probably have to start renting properties for 10 years. That we can clean up some of those mistakes by having mentors or reading books and learning strategies. But at the end of the day, the water has to hit the road, and we're going to go out there and we're going to make mistakes. We're going to crack some eggs, but that's okay. That's part of the process. And so I'm someone who's big on recognizing that waiting to start something makes it harder to start something in the future. That in many ways we have inertia problems, that I want to do a certain thing, but I don't necessarily want to do it today. And we might let ourselves off the hook by saying we could do it in the future. I know where it's like, hey, I'm going to wait for the new year to do the new me. I'm someone who would say, well, if you know what the new you looks like, start that today. Start doing the things that that person would do. Become that person. Gain that wisdom and that understanding. And that way you can have them into the new year. Because the reality is the numbers show that I think like 80% of people by the 6th week are done with their New Year's resolution. Because we don't become the person. Even when I talk about money, I know some people is like, look, Dre, I don't know if that's really that important. Part of the reason I talk about money is because of who we have to become to get it. Because if it was just about getting the money, then we would just play the lottery and win the lottery. But you and I know that 70% of people who play the lottery broke within 3 years. So it has little to do with actually the money. It has to do with our economic value, how we perceive the world, how we engage and interact with the world. And then we're able to provide so much value that those people are excited to give us money. Like, could you imagine, right? I provide so much value that the trade-off of giving the money, you're like, that is more valuable than the money. And I just love the idea of that for people, that we're all solving problems, that we're all helping make the world a better place. And you're doing it so much so that the world is like, here, have some money. Please continue solving problems. I appreciate the value that you bring. Now, for someone who's recognizing that, all right, the time is now, that delaying for the future is not a guarantee that the future will be better, then you're probably like, all right, well, Dre, what should I do? And I'll summarize for you the 4 approaches that we've discussed that you can start using so that you start valuing your future just as much as you're valuing the present. So if we want to just get started, then I think automating things is always a great approach. Or the less you have to think about something, the less likely it is that we can talk ourselves out of it, because we're really good at talking ourselves out of things. So just by automating it, where either the money comes out of the paycheck, where you can set that up literally at the company, or if the money goes into your account, you can then have it automatically taken out of your account on the same day that it's deposited. And then it goes into whatever your future investment funds are. And when it comes to choosing the investments, we could choose something that's relatively safe, and you can choose an investment that matches your risk tolerance. There's lots of allocations out there, and I'll put a link to another video where I go through a handful of investment strategies. But the idea is I don't want to force myself to think really at any point along the way. I want the money to go in there automatically. I want the allocations of the investments to happen automatically. And then I don't think about it, because if the market goes up and down, emotionally, we're like, I don't know, that fear is coming. I'm just going to sell everything. But if we have a strategy that's already in place, that already takes all the economic cycles into consideration, that could be something as simple as a permanent portfolio. You and I will then immediately say, all right, well, I recognize that there are losses that are happening. I recognize that there are gains that are happening. And I recognize I already have a plan that accounts for both of them. So I'm just going to stick to the plan. Number two is you want to start small. I know that as I've been training for my marathon, the first one's going to be in December that I've ever done. That if there's a day that I have to run maybe like 3 miles, I'm like, all right, no problem. I'm just going to be able to run that at any point in time during the day. If it's the day I have to run like 10 miles, then I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, I don't have enough time to be able to do that. And those end up being the days that are harder for me to get started because I'm like, oh, you have to have so much time allocated to be able to run those 10 miles. Or don't judge my pace, but I recognize that if it's a smaller amount, I can just immediately get out there and get started. If it's a larger amount, I have to put a lot more effort and planning into place to make sure I hit my numbers that day. When it comes to investing for your future, you want to have that feeling that I don't need to overthink this. $50, boom, I put that aside. I don't have to overthink this. Oh, it's $2,000 a month? Okay, well, maybe I need to pay my credit card down first. Maybe I want to wait till my kids go to college. Maybe I want to make sure, right, all these things where it's a larger amount. Smaller amount, I'm just like, that's no problem. I'll just drive the speed limit for the week and I'll be able to do that. That's the idea of starting small. You don't have to overthink it and you won't be as concerned about getting started. Number three is you do need to visualize your future you. Because remember, the study said that when we visualize our future us, that your brain waves are measuring it almost as a stranger because we don't do it enough. It's not as clear of a picture. Get a very nice, clear picture of what the things future you will do with the time once you purchase it back. And then you can compare that to the things that we're spending the money on today. Is it more valuable than that thing I would have done in the future? You want to bridge the gap where the two of you are the same person. And that might mean just having a conversation with future you, where you really sit there and you visualizing like, what type of things would future you tell me? And that's one of those things that I've seen where they talk about the idea of the Solomon paradox, which is I know what I should do. And when I coach others, I do a great job. But when I talk to myself, I don't necessarily listen to my own advice. And so it's like, well, what if future you is giving you the advice? Would that change the way that you respond to it? And it's just another visualization technique that I find value in. And if you do, then obviously try it out. And then number four is you want to reward yourself. I'm big on rewards. Gamification is a real thing. It's how a lot of society controls us, that we get rewards for certain things. We get punishments for other things. It's how our relationship with our parents was when we grew up. It's how relationships with our teachers and our sports coaches, that we do certain things, we get rewards, and then we do more of those things. We do certain things, we get punished, and we do less of those things. And ideally, those people were looking out for our best interest. So that way, when we align our behavior with the reward system, it actually was benefiting us the most. But we know that that is a thing. And we see that with like Candy Crush and all sorts of things where the levels are super easy early on. You get the dopamine hit, it feels really good. And then at some point, the game slows down and it's very hard to level up. And the idea is you feel so good about the reward system that you will pay us money for a otherwise free game so that you can get that feeling again quickly. And it's diabolical if you really think about it, but they generate hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So we know that this stuff works. We know the idea of gamifying, of rewarding yourself for doing the right thing. We know that it works really well. Now, you don't want to be too crazy on your reward where you're spending all of your future money, but you should reward yourself. Just take a moment and be like, hey, good job. So that way your mind's like, yes, I want to do more of this. This feels really good. And hopefully what you notice is saving is less about the math and more about the behavior. And that as we change our habits, that the numbers will follow. And so next time your brain says, oh, I'll get started next month, know that future you is proud of you for getting started today. And that future you is counting on you, and they will thank you for every single dollar that you invested. If you found this video helpful, then I ask for you to like and subscribe so you continue receiving valuable insights on how to create your own wealthy retirement system. And until next time, I'm Dre Griggs, founder of Obsidian Wisdom, where we help you to have more wisdom and less worry. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.